Hollywood sold the world a dream, but behind the studio gates, that dream often came with a secret price. What happened when an actress refused to pay it? During the Golden Age, powerful directors and producers controlled careers with a single decision. Many stars stayed silent. A few refused to play along. These women risked everything: roles, contracts, even their reputations. And the consequences of saying no were far more brutal than most Hollywood histories ever reveal. Jane Greer, Out of the Past, 1947. By the time Jane Greer appeared in the film noir classic Out of the Past in 1947, she had already learned how carefully a young actress had to navigate Hollywood power. Greer entered the industry as a teenager under contract with RKO Pictures. Like many actresses of the era, and she quickly discovered that success often depended on more than talent. Studio executives, directors, and producers held enormous control over casting decisions. Years later, Greer openly acknowledged that the casting couch culture existed during Hollywood's golden age. According to her recollections, actresses frequently faced situations where powerful men expected personal favors in exchange for roles. Greer made it clear that she chose another path. Instead of playing along with those expectations, she focused on professionalism and craft. It meant her career sometimes moved slower than others who had stronger studio backing. Yet her performance as the mysterious Kathy Moffat proved something powerful. Talent could still shine, even in an industry where integrity sometimes came at a cost. Teresa Wright, Mrs. Miniver, 1942. When Teresa Wright arrived in Hollywood in the early 1940s, she quickly became one of the most respected young actresses in the industry. Her breakthrough role came in Mrs. Miniver, released in 1942. The film won multiple Academy Awards and established Wright as a rising star with remarkable emotional depth. But Wright was different from many young actresses trying to survive the studio system. She refused to participate in publicity stunts designed to manufacture romance with co-stars. She disliked manipulative publicity campaigns and resisted the pressure to behave the way studio executives expected. That independence soon caused tension. RKO Pictures eventually labeled her uncooperative, a dangerous reputation in an era when studios could easily damage a performer's career. The Wright's refusal to conform, whether in publicity or private expectations, made powerful figures uncomfortable, yet she never apologized for it. Instead, she focused entirely on her work, earning praise for performances that felt sincere and grounded. In an industry built on control, Teresa Wright quietly proved that dignity could be more powerful than compliance. Deborah Kerr, The King and I, 1956. Deborah Kerr built a reputation for elegance and composure that stood out even among Hollywood's most polished stars. Her performance in The King and I, released in 1956, became one of the defining roles of her career. Playing the strong-willed Anna Leon Owens opposite Yul Brynner, Kerr displayed intelligence, grace, and quiet strength. Those qualities were not just part of her screen persona. Behind the scenes, Kerr maintained firm professional boundaries in an industry where many actresses felt pressured to tolerate unwanted attention from powerful men. Biographers often describe Kerr as careful and deliberate about the roles she accepted and the environments she worked in. She avoided the parties, favors, and private meetings that often surrounded Hollywood power networks. Instead, she focused on discipline and professionalism. Her reputation for dignity made her respected by colleagues, but also slightly distant from the inner circles where careers were sometimes negotiated in private. Yet Kerr's long career proved something important. An actress did not need to participate in Hollywood's darker traditions to become one of the era's most admired performers. Her success came from skill, restraint, and an unwavering sense of personal boundaries. Greer Garson, Mrs. Miniver, 1942. Greer Garson arrived in Hollywood with an unusual advantage for the era: a strong stage background and a personality that studio executives found difficult to control. Her most famous performance came in Mrs. Miniver, released in 1942. The wartime drama became one of MGM's biggest successes and earned Garson the Academy Award for Best Actress. But Garson's reputation behind the scenes was just as notable as her on-screen work. She carried herself with a level of authority that few actresses were encouraged to display during the studio era. Directors and producers often discovered that Garson approached filmmaking as a serious craft rather than a social game. Hollywood in the 1940s operated on complicated relationships between power and opportunity. Young actresses were frequently invited into private meetings where careers could be shaped or quietly limited. Garson preferred a different approach. She maintained a highly controlled professional life and avoided the social environments where such expectations often emerged. Instead of relying on favors or influence, she built her career through performances that studios simply could not ignore. Her commanding screen presence made her one of MGM's most valuable stars. And in a system designed to pressure young performers into submission, Greer Garson proved that quiet authority could be its own form of resistance. Maureen O'Hara, The Quiet Man, 1952. Maureen O'Hara possessed something rare in Golden Age Hollywood, a fearless willingness to speak openly about the industry's darker realities. Her performance in The Quiet Man, released in 1952, became one of the most beloved roles of her career. Acting opposite John Wayne under the direction of John Ford, O'Hara delivered a fiery portrayal that audiences still celebrate today. But the Irish-born actress was just as formidable off-screen. In interviews later in life, O'Hara directly criticized the casting couch culture that had existed during Hollywood's early decades. She stated that some actresses had been pressured into compromising situations by powerful men who controlled casting decisions. O'Hara insisted she refused to participate in that system. She described confronting producers and executives who believed young actresses would simply comply with whatever was demanded of them. That refusal carried risk. Hollywood during the 1940s and 50s could quietly punish performers who challenged authority. Roles could disappear, contracts could be reduced, careers could stall. Yet O'Hara's strong personality and undeniable talent made her difficult to ignore. Directors valued her intensity and authenticity on screen, while audiences admired the strength she projected in her characters. In a world where silence was often the safest choice, Maureen O'Hara chose something far more dangerous. She spoke the truth and refused to compromise who she was. Ida Lupino, The Hitchhiker, 1953. Few actresses in Golden Age Hollywood challenged the system as boldly as Ida Lupino. Known today as one of the first major female directors in American cinema, Lupino began her career as a successful actress during the 1930s and 40s. But she soon grew frustrated with the limits placed on women within the industry. Her directorial work eventually produced films such as The Hitchhiker, released in 1953. Lupino had already experienced firsthand how Hollywood power structures operated. Studio executives controlled scripts, casting, and personal reputations. Actresses were often expected to remain agreeable and compliant in order to continue receiving roles. Lupino rejected that expectation. Rather than quietly navigating the system, she began producing and directing her own projects, an almost unheard-of move for a woman at the time. Her films often explored subjects that studios avoided, including crime, social pressure, and moral complexity. By stepping behind the camera, Lupino removed herself from the environment where actresses were frequently pressured to accommodate powerful men. She built a career based on creative control rather than compliance. In doing so, Ida Lupino transformed resistance into something even more powerful: independence. And in the male-dominated Hollywood of the 1950s, that independence was nothing short of revolutionary. Barbara Stanwyck, Double Indemnity, 1944. By the time Double Indemnity arrived in theaters in 1944, Barbara Stanwyck had already earned a reputation as one of the toughest and most disciplined professionals in Hollywood. The film would become one of the defining works of film noir. Stanwyck's portrayal of the manipulative Phyllis Dietrichson shocked audiences with its icy confidence and emotional intensity. But behind that performance was an actress who had survived Hollywood on her own terms. Stanwyck's life before fame had been brutally difficult. Orphaned at a young age, she learned early that survival required independence and resilience. When she entered the film industry, those instincts stayed with her. Unlike many actresses of the era, Stanwyck avoided the social circles where powerful producers and directors often mingled with performers. She approached filmmaking as a job, arriving prepared, delivering strong performances, and leaving the set without becoming entangled in studio politics. Her professionalism became legendary. Directors respected her because she knew her lines, understood her characters, and demanded the same seriousness from everyone around her. In a system where actresses were often treated as disposable, Stanwyck quietly established a different standard. She wasn't simply another contract player. She was a professional whose authority came from talent and from the refusal to let anyone else control her career. Jean Arthur, Mr. Smith, Goes to Washington, 1939. Jean Arthur was one of the most unusual stars of Hollywood's golden age. By the time she appeared in Mr. Smith, Goes to Washington in 1939, Arthur had already built a reputation for avoiding the glamorous social world that surrounded most movie stars. Unlike many actresses of the era, she disliked Hollywood parties and industry gatherings. She rarely attended studio events and often withdrew from the spotlight whenever filming ended. This distance wasn't accidental. Arthur understood how power worked inside the studio system. Directors and executives frequently used social invitations as opportunities to influence careers behind closed doors. Arthur chose not to participate. Instead, she focused entirely on the work itself. On screen, she delivered performances filled with warmth and intelligence, becoming one of the most beloved actresses of the 1930s and 40s. Yet off-screen, she remained private and fiercely protective of her independence. Some studio executives found her difficult to manage precisely because she refused to play the social game. But that independence also protected her. Jean Arthur proved that an actress could maintain distance from Hollywood's most powerful figures and still build a career based purely on talent. In an industry obsessed with influence, she relied on something far simpler: her ability to captivate audiences. Loretta Young, The Farmer's Daughter, 1947. Loretta Young carried an image of grace and moral conviction that shaped both her public persona and her private life. Her performance in The Farmer's Daughter, released in 1947, earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress and confirmed her position among Hollywood's most respected stars. But Young's career unfolded within an industry where moral boundaries were often tested. Hollywood's studio system held immense power over performers, especially young actresses entering the business. Directors and producers could transform unknown newcomers into stars, or quietly end their careers. Young approached this environment with caution. Raised with strong religious values, she maintained strict personal principles throughout her career. Colleagues frequently described her as disciplined, reserved, and unwilling to participate in behavior she considered inappropriate. This stance sometimes placed her at odds with the more permissive culture that surrounded Hollywood's elite. Yet Young's reputation for integrity became part of her identity. Audiences trusted the sincerity she brought to her roles, and while studios valued the dignity she projected on screen. In a world where compromise often opened doors, Loretta Young chose conviction instead, and that decision helped shape one of the most respected careers of the era. Bette Davis, All About Eve, 1950. Few actresses in Hollywood history challenged authority as fiercely as Bette Davis. Her performance in All About Eve, released in 1950, remains one of the most celebrated portrayals in cinema history. Playing the aging stage star Margot Channing, Davis delivered a performance filled with wit, bitterness, and sharp intelligence. But the character's defiance reflected something deeply personal. Davis spent much of her career battling the studio system itself. During the 1930s, she famously sued Warner Brothers, while attempting to escape a contract that forced her into roles she considered unworthy of her talent. The lawsuit was unprecedented and shocked Hollywood. Although she lost the case, the fight revealed something powerful about Davis. She refused to allow powerful executives, or anyone else, to control her career completely. Directors who worked with her quickly discovered that Davis would challenge decisions she disagreed with. She demanded respect as an artist, rather than obedience as an employee. That stubborn independence made her difficult for studios to manage, but it also made her unforgettable. Bette Davis didn't simply survive Hollywood's power structure. She confronted it head-on. Katharine Hepburn, The Philadelphia Story, 1940. Katharine Hepburn never behaved the way Hollywood expected a leading lady to behave. When The Philadelphia Story premiered in 1940, it revived her career after several years, when studios labeled her box office poison. But Hepburn had already proven something unusual. She refused to shape her personality to satisfy studio expectations. While many actresses were carefully molded by publicity departments, Hepburn wore practical clothes, spoke her mind, and ignored the elaborate social rituals that surrounded Hollywood's power brokers. Directors sometimes admired her independence. Executives sometimes feared it. Hepburn approached acting as a craft rather than a performance of obedience. She insisted on choosing projects that interested her and collaborating with filmmakers she respected. If a role or environment felt wrong, she simply walked away. That stubborn independence ultimately became part of her legend. Katharine Hepburn's career lasted decades, proving that one of Hollywood's greatest stars succeeded without surrendering control of who she was. Olivia de Havilland, Gone with the Wind, 1939. Olivia de Havilland changed Hollywood forever. When she appeared as Melanie Hamilton in Gone with the Wind, released in 1939, the film became one of the most famous productions in cinema history. But her greatest battle happened away from the camera. During the 1940s, de Havilland challenged Warner Brothers over a contract that effectively trapped actors under studio control. The system allowed studios to extend contracts indefinitely whenever performers were suspended. De Havilland refused to accept it. She took the studio to court in a landmark legal fight that stunned the industry. When she won the case in 1944, the ruling weakened the power studios held over their actors. The decision became known as the de Havilland Law. By confronting the system directly, Olivia de Havilland did something almost unimaginable in Golden Age Hollywood. She proved that even the most powerful studios could be challenged, and in doing so, she helped change the rules for every actor who followed. Behind the glamour of old Hollywood stood a system few dared to challenge. Yet these actresses proved that talent and courage could outlast intimidation. They refused the quiet compromises that shaped countless careers. Their stories remind us that the brightest stars weren't just performers. They were